All right, guys, today we're going to be starting 5.1 ratios and ratio tables. There are a few vocab words that I'd like you to write down, so go ahead and write this down at the top of your notes. So first off, you've got the definition. The definition of a ratio is a comparison of two quantities or two numbers. So it's comparing two things together. There are three separate ways to write a ratio. Read me how the first one says. A to B. Guess what? This one right here is also read A to B. Guess how this one is read? A divided by B. Nope, it's also read A to B when that is a ratio. Normally we look at that as A divided by B, but it actually is read A to B when talking about it as a ratio. A ratio is basically dividing the first quantity or the first thing by the second quantity or the second thing. For number one, it says you make flubber using the ingredients in the table. Do you guys know what flubber is?
No. Is it rubber? It's like a movie.
It's kind of like slime. How many of you have ever made slime before? Okay. Flubber is like another kind of slime. Read to me what the ingredients are in our table. Cold water, hot water, glue, and borax. All right, so those are the four things that we need whenever we are making flubber. The thing it has asked us to do is to write the ratio of cold water to glue. The first thing that we're doing is figuring out how much cold water we need. How much do we need, class? 3/2 cups. Okay, so let's write 3/2. And I taught you three different ways to write a ratio. You could say 3/2 to, let's look at the next one. We're comparing how much glue we need. How much glue did we need? 2 cups. So it's 3/2 to 2. You're writing this on the line where it says ratio. There's another way we could write that. 3/2 to 2. That's a second way to write the same exact material. And there was one final way that you wrote in your red notes at top. What was the last way? With a fraction bar. Okay, so this is it. 3/2 to 2. All of those are said the same exact way. They just look a little bit different. Now the next line that you guys have on your notes, it says value of the ratio. What we are trying to do, our whole goal, is to find the value of the ratio. The value of the ratio is basically how the first amount compares to the second amount. So each time that we try to find the value of the ratio, we're actually going to use this one with the fraction bar. So on your line, value of the ratio, if you guys would, write 3/2 to 2. You might have to write kind of small on that line. Remind me again, guys, what does it mean when I have a fraction bar? It means to divide. So let's write this down. That means 3/2 divided by 2. Now I could put 2 over what? 1. Over a 1. Am I allowed to divide fractions? No. What method do I have to use?
KFC.
The KFC method, okay? So keep the first one, flip the, and change the. Very good. When you multiply that out, now you're going to get the value of our ratio. Guys, what is 3/2 times 1/2? 3/4 is correct. So the value of our ratio is 3/4. All right, the final thing that you see there is the word interpretation. That means, what in the world does this mean? What is the first thing that we are comparing? Cold water. Okay, we are comparing that. That's our first thing, and we're comparing it to glue. So for your answer, when you write interpretation, I want you to write this. The amount of cold water is, what did we get for the value of our ratio? 3/4. So then we're going to put it's 3/4 the amount of, and what was the second thing that we are comparing? Glue. Good job. The first thing was cold water. The second thing was the glue. So the amount of cold water is 3/4 the amount of glue. And that is what you have to do when you interpret what the value of the ratio means. All right, so the next thing you're going to write in your red notes is equivalent ratios. Guys, do you remember the word equivalent? What's that mean? Equal, all right? So we've got two ratios that basically describe the same exact relationship. The example I wrote here is 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. Can anyone else think what else could also be 1/2? What else could be another equivalent ratio? Okay, but as a fraction, what would another one be? 5/10, that would be another one. What else? 3/6, 12/24. All of those are equivalent ratios. Each of those mean the same thing as 1/2. This next one says to find the missing values in the ratio table. Then write the equivalent ratios, the things that are equal. So you can organize equivalent ratios in a table. One thing we will make sure we've got to do is find the value of the ratio each time. One key thing I want you to write, take your red pen and draw an arrow from the top line to the bottom line. Anytime you are working from the top to the bottom, you're going to divide. So to the left of that little arrow, I want you to put a divide. Now let's imagine that instead, let's go to the right side of the box. I have the bottom one and I want to get to the top. That's doing the opposite thing. So what is the opposite of dividing? Multiplying. So put a little multiply there. What's happening here is, once again, the key is finding the value of our ratio. In order to do this, we have to divide the first quantity, or the first number, by the second quantity, or the second number. So if you look right here, the first quantity is 18, and the second one is 3. Guys, what is 18 divided by 3? 6. Everybody stick in the value of the ratio is 6. Now, a ratio table is a combination of a bunch of equivalent ratios. This right here, I like to call, in the middle, the missing link. If I can figure out what that value of the ratio is, I can answer every other problem on my entire table. Now, the cool thing is, we figured out the first value of the ratio is 6. Because this is equivalent ratios, guess what? Every single other value of the ratio is going to be 6. So you can fill that across the entire table. Now let's see if we can fill in the other pieces. Looking at this one, does it give us the original on the bottom or on the top? On the bottom, so I have to work from the bottom up. If I'm going from the bottom to the top, do I have to multiply or divide? Multiply. What's 5 times 6? 30. Let's go to this next one right here. It gave us the top, so I'm working from the top to the bottom. Should I multiply or divide? Divide. So I'm going to do 42 divided by 6. My answer will be 7. You guys do the last one on your own. As you can see, we're working from a 4 up to the top, so the correct answer for X would be 24. Very good. So now what we did is we filled in the missing values. The second part says to write the equivalent ratios. Remember, we write the equivalent ratios. We're going to do it this way. Directly underneath it, if you guys would, write 18 to 3. At this point, you don't need to actually cross this out, but I no longer need the value of the ratio. That was just a missing link that I needed to find all the other answers. Now I'm just comparing the top number to the bottom number. What is the second thing that I'm going to be comparing there? 30 to 5. So directly underneath it, let's write 30 to 5. Moving on to the next one, Matthew, what's the third thing that we're comparing? You are correct, 42 to 7. And finally, Talila, what are we comparing on the last one? 24 to 4. And each of those are now our equivalent ratios. For the next one, we are comparing cups to quarts. So remember, in order to be a ratio table, it has to be the same value all the way across. So we're going to take the first thing that we have there. What's the top number? 3. And when I write this ratio, I'm going to say 3 to, what is the second thing I'm comparing it to? 3/4 quarts. So now we've got to find the value of our ratio. In order to do that, I'm just going to be dividing them. So take the first term we have there, which is a 3. I'm going to put it over a 1 so that it also looks like a fraction. And then remember, this fraction bar right here means to divide. Very good. So we'll put the divide right here. Divide by 3/4. Class, am I allowed to divide by 3/4? No, so I've got to use the KFC method. Everybody, if you would, keep the first one, which is flip the second one, 4/3, and change the operation. Very good. Gavin, can I cross-reduce anything? Yes. What do the 3's become? 1's. And when you multiply that out, Isaac, what do you get?
You get 4/1.
4/1, which is?
4.
Just plain old 4. Very good. Circle that for me, guys. And that is the value of your ratio. So we're going to put this back into our table. And if the value of the ratio is 4 for the first one, what will it be for the rest of the table? 4. Once again, you just found the missing link. If you would, take your red pen one more time just to help us and remind us. Take that arrow going from the top to the bottom. What will I do? Divide. Everyone put the divide. On the right-hand side, doing the opposite. If I'm going from the bottom to the top, I have to multiply. So let's focus on this first one right here. I'm starting at the top and I've got to move down toward the bottom. Hope, will I be dividing or multiplying? I am dividing. What's 12 divided by 4? 3. So we've got 12 cups to 3 quarts. Let's go on to the next one. I'm starting at the top. I'm working toward the bottom. Do I divide or multiply? Divide. What am I dividing, guys? 15 divided by 4. Well, guess what? We're going to just leave it like that, because if you look at this, that was a fraction, which means I want this to also be a fraction, not a decimal. And if you focus on that first circle right there, that's an improper fraction. So do you think it's okay to keep that one improper? Yes, it is. All right, so it's going to be staying at 15/4. Finally, let's look at the last one. I know 5/4. That's the bottom number, so I'm working toward the top. Hayden, if I work from the bottom to the top, am I multiplying or dividing? I am going to be multiplying. So off to the side, if you would, take that number on the bottom, 5/4, and multiply times the value of your ratio. I'm going to put it over a 1. I'd like you guys to get the answer and then put it at the top of your table. What'd you guys get?
5.
5 is correct. So now the final step of today is we are going to rewrite these as equivalent fractions. Start with the very first one right here. If you remember, we no longer need the missing link, so just pretend that's not there. We are comparing the top number to the bottom number. First things first, Angeline, 3, 2, what's the first thing? You are correct, 3 to 3/4. Einar, what's the next one? You're comparing that second one right there.
12 to 3.
12 to 3 is correct. Amira, what's the next one? 15 to 15/4 is correct. And Trenton, what's the last one?
5/4 to 5.
Okay, always compare the first number, the one on top first. So 5 to 5/4, okay? And order is really important. Always make sure you do that first one first and the second one second. And those are our equivalent ratios for problem B. For this next one, we're going to do something just slightly different. If you guys would, this is the first one that we're comparing, so just put a little 1. This is the second one, so we're going to put a little 2. And this is the third and final one we're comparing. We're going to put a little 3. Just to keep our information organized, over here we're going to start with number 1. If I am trying to compare the top number to the bottom number in order to get the value of my ratio, what do I have to do? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide? We have to divide. So take the first one, 5/2 divided by the second quantity. Brayden, what's the second quantity there? 4 is correct. Now let's just rewrite that. That means 5/2 divided by 4/1. Jalen, what should I do next? Okay, keep flip change. Keep the first one, flip the second one. Very good. Is there anything that you can cross-reduce there, Jalen? No, there is not. So let's multiply it across. Ava, what do you get? 5/8 is correct. If you guys would, go ahead and circle it. That is the value of our ratio. So we're going to put it in our first box right there. What do I do with it now, class? Very good. We're going to fill in all of the boxes with the value of our ratio, because remember, the value of the ratio does not change for the entire table. Let's go on to number 2. I am working from the bottom to the top. Should I multiply or divide? We are going to multiply. So start with the first number. Since we're working on the bottom to the top, we're going to start with a 16 over 1 and multiply it times, what was the value of my ratio? 5/8. Angeline, can I cross reduce anything? Very good. 8 and 16, what do they become? Very good. And Talila, what do you get? When you multiply it out, what do you get? 10 over 1, which is a 10. Very good. So our answer is 10. All right, we only have one left, number 3. If you would, just write a little number 3 down there. And it looks like, am I working from the top to the bottom, class, or from the bottom to the top? The top to the bottom. It gives me the top. It tells me how many kilometers it is. 5, okay? So if I'm working from top to bottom, do I have to add, subtract, multiply, or divide? We are going to divide. So I've got 5 over 1 divided by, what's the value of my ratio? 5/8. Who can help me with what to do? Amira, go ahead.
Keep the first, put 5/8, and put 5/8 and 10
Very good. Can I cross reduce anything? What did the 5s become? 2 1s. And when you work that out, what answer do you get? 8 over 1, which is just plain old 8. And that is our last and final one that we're going to compare up there. Now it has asked us once again to write equivalent ratios. You're probably going to have to do it toward the right somewhere because of the sake of space. Let's compare the first one. If I have 5/2 kilometers, how much time will that take me?
4 hours.
Very good. So 5/2 to 4. Let's look at the next one. If I have 10 kilometers, how many hours will that take me?
16 hours.
10 to 16. And the last and final one, Braden, what will I be comparing? You are correct. 5 kilometers to 8 hours. And those are our equivalent fractions. For this problem, you mix 2 teaspoons of baking soda with 3 teaspoons of salt. Write the ratio of baking soda to salt, find the value of the ratio, and interpret what the value of the ratio means in a complete sentence. So on tonight's homework, if you have a problem that looks like this, should you write the original problem? No, why not?
Because it's more than one sentence.
It's more than one sentence. Here's what you're going to write for your answer. You're going to start with the word ratio, value of the ratio, and interpretation. That's what you're going to write for your original problem. Let's find the ratio. Remember, we're going to compare the first quantity to the second quantity. What's the first thing it tells me in my story problem? 2/3. All right, so let's write it like this. 2/3 to, and what am I comparing that to? 3 teaspoons. And that's it. That is how you write your ratio. You're just comparing the first thing to the second thing. Now remember, there were other ways. We could have said 2/3 to 3. Do you guys remember the other way? The fraction bar, 2/3 over 3. You can write it either way. On your homework, I do believe it's going to be asking you to write it like this way, okay? Now to find the value of the ratio, what do I have to do? I have to divide. Very good. So let's start with the first one. What's the first one? 2/3. Divided by what?
3 over 1.
3. Very good. So I want you guys to try to work this out on your own. All right, your steps should look similar to mine, and when you multiplied that out, guys, what did you get? What's 3 times 3 on the bottom? 2/9. Okay, so what's the value of our ratio? 2/9. Very good. Now what I want you to do is I want you to flip to the front notes where we did problem number 1. On problem number 1, we were comparing cold water to glue. Will you guys read to me what the interpretation was on the cold water to the glue? What does it say? Okay, so since you just saw that interpretation, I want you to go back to the problem number 1 we were just working at and see if you can write the interpretation of what this problem means. All right, does anyone want to tell me what you came up with for the interpretation? Jalen, what'd you write? 4. Perfect, okay? The amount of baking soda is 2/9 the amount of salt. So remember, as you do it, you take the first thing it asks for, the first thing it tells us. It talks about baking soda. So the amount of baking soda is, and then you take the value of your ratio, 2/9, the amount of, and then once again, like he just said, you compare it to the second quantity of salt. And that's the interpretation. That's what all of that work there means. All right, for this last problem today, it says find the missing values in the ratio table, then write the equivalent ratios. Guys, there is one thing that's missing from this that has been on our other ones. What's missing on this? That middle row. What do we call the middle row? Okay, it's our missing link, but that's the value of the ratio. Listen, let me tell you. Most of your homeworks are going to look like this. It does not have a box that says value of the ratio. That doesn't mean you can't still find out what the value of the ratio is. So let's look at this first one. If I have 20 calories per 5 miles, you're dividing those, 20 divided by 5. Guys, what is the value of our ratio? 4. Off to the side, I want you guys to write it. Once again, tonight's homework is not going to have that little missing link in there. That's just something that I kind of came up with to try to help you to understand it better. That still means, though, the value of the ratio is going to be 4. If it's 4 for the first one, what will it be for the rest of the box? It will be 4 all the way across. Now, you're just going to do it mentally in your head. I want you guys to try to fill in the rest of your box on your own. If it helps you to put the little red arrow there saying from top to bottom you're going to be dividing, or from the bottom to the top you're going to be multiplying, you can put that there. If you mentally know it, you don't have to write that anymore. All right, let's see what you came up with. 3 miles, how many calories would that be, guys? 12, very good, because I would have to multiply by 4. How about 16 calories? That would be 4 miles. And this is the trickiest one because it is a fraction. I'm going from the bottom to the top. Will I be multiplying or dividing? Multiplying. What is half of 4? 2 is correct. Now we're going to go ahead. Remember the last part says to write the equivalent ratios. The first one is 20 to 5. Girls, the next one is 12 to 3. Boys, the third one? 16 to 4. And finally, what's the last one, guys? 2 to 1/2. And that is how you come up with equivalent ratios. Remember, always find the missing link, even if you don't see it right there in the middle of your box. You just have to be the one who figures out what the missing link is. All right, if you have not yet, I'd like you guys to go ahead and write this down. 5.1 homework is just 7 problems tonight.